fixed to Jesus, because that was the most important day for the Romans, was Saturnalia,
Well,
December 25th.
the Saturnalia, of course, predates the Romans. The Romans picked it up, the Greeks picked it up from the Babylonians. And so the caveat there is this is most important. Roman. See, the Saturnalia was an event that they took over. Now, yes, absolutely, it's supremely important to them. It was the beginning of, and they believed in the God of light. They're basically, in a lot of ways, still sun worshipers.
Yeah, the return of light.
The return of light idea. And it was extremely important to them. But it was the difference between, say, Christmas and the 4th of July. 4th of July is uniquely American.
Oh,
You
okay.
see, and whereas Christmas is a worldwide event. Saturnalia was their worldwide event, but their particular, their 4th of July, their most important holiday of Roman identity. And the point of this is that they identify so strongly with the Trojans and what they believe the Trojans stood for. And they don't want really to be, when they take over Greek, they still continue their Greek gods. They have Roman gods' names. They have Roman names for all these things that they take over. But the Saturnalia is certainly becomes Christmas.
Yeah.
And Lupercalia becomes Valentine's Day. So old holidays never die. They just are transformed, reworked, renamed, and so yeah, you a great point that the Saturnalia. I think the Romans were happy to have any kind of holiday, but they identified themselves and the growth of their culture. See, part of this whole business of running the gauntlet was to get more girls pregnant. So more Romans, see. They always want to expand the population. It's always about growing the population of Romans as distinct from the barbarians, wherever they are. So this is hopefully important subject. Yes.
So does holiday mean holy day?
Yes, holy day.
Okay, that literally, okay.
So what happened?
I was hoping there was
yeah.
a deep meaning behind
No,
it.
it got secularized, but this happens to a lot of words, right? The word Christmas has been secularized, so now we can
It's been
officially.
monetized.
And it's been correct. It's been monetized. It's a very good, Jimmy. It's in our culture. We tend to want to keep certain holidays important, but time will take its toll on a holiday. For example, Memorial Day. Memorial Day is like not a very big deal, or Labor Day. They're just the bookends for summer, beginning of summer, end of summer. But they were much bigger when I was a kid. Memorial Day was huge when I was a kid. And Labor Day, there used to be Labor Day parades all over the United States, and hardly anything going on Labor Day.
Oh.
And then you have Valentine's Day. It's gotten much bigger. I would say, huh? Yeah, exactly. It's got to become good point. Yeah,
Getting bigger and
good
bigger.
point. So it evolves and changes, but again, we never get rid of a holiday. So the one that's gotten so big, really as big as Valentine's Day, is Mother's Day. Mother's Day just started about 1901, and of all places, West Virginia. And yet today, in terms of money spent, second only to Christmas. There's an enormous amount of money spent on it. Father's Day,
Yeah, right.
dying.
Just a piece of leather.
Very good, Donald. Yeah,
Well, the joke about guts was supposed to be an Aquarian joke, but I think there's only one or two of us in here that got it. So
totally
sorry
got it.
about
Yeah,
that. Yeah,
exactly.
right.
Yeah, we were talking about gut gazing, and this idea, that you can study the guts of an animal and predict the future, which is about as accurate probably as tea leaves or crystal ball or looking at the stars or anything else under the sun, right? They had literally about 100 different types of prophecy systems. In other words, ways, things of studying. They'd say everything, anything they could think of. They'd look at the leaves on the trees, you know, and watch when they dropped and how they dropped and how many, you know, all this. And became very proficient at studying these. You know, nowadays people will look at somebody's hand, but they were huge on all that. But why
Also face reading.
face reading? Yes. Phrenology, is that phrenology?
Yeah,
Part of the,
Yeah.
no, that would be phrenology.
phrenology is the
The
skull.
skull.
This would be, one of the reasons that they would, hide their face is
Mhm.
because, they could, judge, like if your ears are high or low,
Yeah,
or
or
your
whatever.
eyebrows do
Yeah.
a certain way, or.
Yeah, so you're in trouble.
Yeah, so people
They judge,
would be able to know how to approach you,
Yeah.
and,
Yeah. We've just found that TV show that's old now, but it's new to Catherine and I, called Lie to Me, which is all about this psychologist that got all the micro expressions.
Oh,
and used it.
really?
It's phenomenal, absolutely
Who
phenomenal.
was the person on the show?
I'll have, the person on the show is his name is Dr. Leitner, but
Leitner.
on, yeah,
It's
but
the
on, I
director.
can't remember the name of the actual.
He's not a big, this is the only thing, he's been in other stuff.
Yeah,
Yeah, well, he's just an actor, but the actual guy that developed this is super famous, but I can't remember his
You
name.
Googled his name because you were.
But I'll
curious
let you know,
about
I'll let you
it. I
know.
studied
I'd like to know.
physiognomy,
Yeah.
which is the study.
physiognomy,
Yeah.
yes, that's it,
Physiognomy.
as with phrenology.
But all that,
Yeah.
but face reading goes back to the Chinese.
Oh, yes.
They're the
yes.
masters of it, they're the ones that codified it,
Right,
you know.
yeah, Hitler tried to do some of that stuff, you know, had all these, he gave all of these charts, eye charts. You know, you can tell all this stuff from the eyes and the eye color, and your racial purity from the eye color and all this. And so all these systems had their day, but I don't think there's anything that people haven't tried, or if they haven't, it's just because nobody's thought of it yet, right? A system to try to figure out the future. Remember the old Farmer's Almanac? Anybody, people used to,
Yeah.
man,
Oh, we
they
grew up
buy
with
it.
it.
You grew up and boy, you believed that sucker and whatever it said. What you planned, if it's gonna be a dry year, you made a combination for that. So every generation wants to see the future. Now, do we still have horoscopes in newspapers? Are
We
they?
still have newspapers, that's a bigger question.
Touche, very good, Jimmy.
Touchy, yes.
Yeah, well, yeah, newspapers are, as we know them, as printed, it's hard to say if they're finished or not, but they're on the way out, but do they go out completely? I hope not. I still like to read papers, right, newspapers, and there are a few magazines are way down, there's still a few left, but I don't know, it's hard to see so much change so rapidly. We had the man named Toffler one time about 40 years ago.
Alvin Toffler.
Alvin Toffler,
And his-
Future Shock.
And his wife, yeah.
So he came to our school and talked, and what he was saying made great sense. And one point he made is that the more things change more quickly, the harder it is to adjust, particularly as you grow older.
Oh, yeah.
Because change is very easy for a baby, but change is very difficult when you're used to the world being a certain way and then it starts to change, right? And so we do these workarounds and adaptations, what?
That's how we.
We like learning computers.
Yeah, well, yeah,
It's changed so
computers,
much in the last
yeah, well, some people, Jimmy, you're an example of this, you're able to adapt and take in the new technology very rapidly, and, but there are people your age and even younger.
That's how we got Trump. Exactly, you just described exactly how we got Trump. There's been so much rapid change in the last 8
Yeah.
years, and it's been too much for the old white folk.
That's right, and they don't like it.
And
so
so
they-
it's a
it's
rebellion
Mhm.
against the gay rights, against the LBGT,
All of
the
it.
transgender, immigration,
The
multicultural.
jobs going to China,
And well,
yeah, and all
Yeah,
that.
it's
Yeah,
just-
the big thing
Yeah.
we're seeing now is if we're changing and going, believe in America,
Yeah,
it's always been to a world order for
Yeah.
30 years.
Right.
We're doing a major change, so most of our younger people have no concept of what it was here
Exactly.
prior to World War
It's,
II.
it's like we're just
Yeah.
turning inward. And what's so fascinating about the marches yesterday, they're almost all called women's marches, as distinct from, say, anti-Trump marches, right? But they're called women's marches. It's, and the women are risen up. The only other time this ever happened was back in, when the women are trying to get the vote, back, after the turn of the century, women would get up and march. But women don't march historically.
There's 2 times that have been prescient when women marched in the streets.
Mm-hmm.
One began the French Revolution and one began the Russian Revolution. When in the March of 1917, before the Bolshevik Revolution,
Right.
it was the first revolution was in March, women marching for bread in the streets. The women were marching for bread in the streets that began the Paris Revolution.
Oh, yeah.
So when women march,
Things happen,
beware.
yeah, beware.
And,
Well, my brother, he's a real political guy. He said, America's gonna have a revolution. He says, I don't know when, but he said Trump is speeding up the process.
oh, there's no question.
Yeah, and so there's gonna be some kind of, somebody's gonna come along, that's gonna trigger it, but now, if Trump is smart, which, that's a dubious theory to start with, but if Trump is smart, he'll just let his people, all those billionaires he has in the cabinet, let them chart a course that's not extreme. But if Trump actually does some of the things he said he's gonna do, but I don't think he really knows what he's gonna do, and I'll tell you why. Yes, on Friday, he gave a talk after they had a lunch after the inauguration, and the very last thing in the lunch he said were these words. I was knocked over on the floor. He said, and ladies and gentlemen, I want to honor today our dear friends, Bill and Hillary Clinton. Will you please stand? And I stand up, give thunderous ovation. And then as soon as they sit down, the last words of his speech were, I so respect these 2 people. Now, this is the very same guy who said in every single speech he made, Hillary is a liar. She can't trust that lady. And then he turns around and says, I so respect these people. I mean, is that amazing to you?
But do you believe he believes that?
No,
Of course not.
but he didn't believe the first one. It's
Yeah.
just because he's the guy that gave money to the Clintons
He'll
way
say
back
anything.
when. Yeah.
He'll say anything.
So that's why I say to you, that any fortune teller, we're all kind of fortune tellers here, thinks they know what's gonna happen, no. I mean, he could come under the influence of his daughter, who's saying very, very liberal things. He could come under the influence of some of these, Cheney-esque people, and who knows? And, or both. You can get
Well,
mad about
hopefully
something.
he does change some. If the president stayed exactly the way he believes when he comes in, it's a
Yeah.
different world.
That's right. Yeah, that's true too. I love Perry saying, oh, I'm gonna fight for the Department of Education. We're not gonna cut any money for, this is the
Energy.
guy, right, I made the same mistake you did. Department of Energy. I'm gonna fight for the Department of Energy. This is the guy who said on record that he wanted to do away with this department when he ran for president.
Department of Education, Betsy DeVos, refused to say that she wasn't gonna push intelligent design, so that's a change. Right now, they've already taken down from the government websites about climate change, that's already been removed.
And it's
They're,
what?
we're not, they're not even taking a position on climate change,
Right.
because
It's what, the third day?
so that's already been removed, that's the new direction.
Yeah, so it's gonna be a roller coaster, I guess.
Paul,
Yeah.
I wanna change this
Yeah,
subject,
sure.
just history,
Yeah,
because I don't do and understand a lot of fortune telling. But my dad was a farmer, and talking about the Farmer's Almanac,
yeah,
he read it, but he farmed by the moon.
Yeah.
He never lost a crop,
Mhm.
as long as his health was strong enough to plant when he knew he should and harvest when he knew he should.
Yep.
When his health failed and he had to hire someone, he had to do it on their schedule.
Yeah.
But as long as he was in control. So there is something about
Absolutely,
that, and he
absolutely.
would never tell any of us. He would
Well,
never tell
you
us.
know,
And he
those-
Fascinating.
invited you, the one to, when he was gonna play?
Right, and he would and someone
Who's
later
this
said,
again?
well, the moon is where it can hold water. Well, is that in the evening or is that in the morning?
Oh.
I mean,
Mhm.
you know, it didn't
Yeah.
make any sense to me. But and if he didn't like someone, or if they had wronged him, and they would call and ask him, is this a good time to plant, or is this a good time to cut?
Mhm.
He would tell them wrong.
Oh.
Oh, that's hilarious,
He
that's
was,
hilarious.
he was not necessarily nice, and he never really had a reputation for
Well,
being
but
nice.
think about it, lunar cycles, that's maternal, that's matriarchal.
Yeah,
And that's the point, see,
Say that again?
it's
That-
matriarchal, in
Yeah.
other words, lunar, in
Oh,
lunar
yeah,
is
yeah.
His mother got it.
mother goddess stuff.
Mhm.
And and that's why, if you're in harmony with the mother,
Yeah,
and that's why, you know, when they did these studies on women, some years ago, they had these women living outside, as a group of them, living outside to see what would happen with their menstrual cycles when they're under the influence of only the moonlight. In other words, they were away from city lights, artificial light. So at nighttime, they would sleep outside under the influence of the moon, and guess what?
they all synced up.
They all synced up, every one of them. That's amazing.
And that's a great metaphor for understanding the lunar calendar over the solar calendar,
Exactly.
which we live by. Solar calendar, we get
Mhm.
from Rome, and it's very patriarchal. But if you go back to the goddess cultures, you've always heard a year and a day, you've heard that expression?
Yes.
Well, that goes back to the goddess culture's lunar-based calendar, because the lunar-based calendar is based on 13 lunations in a calendar year,
Right.
13 lunar movements.
Right,
So each lunation is roughly 28 days, just a little fraction over 28 days.
Yep.
So you 28 days times 13 equals 364, and one day is 365. So a year and a day is a reference to the old lunar calendar.
that's a great point, that's a great point, Jimmy.
And
I
when
had
we
heard that.
sync up, when we start to get in harmony with the moon, then we're getting in harmony with the earth, and then and that's why the Native Americans, indigenous populations, are such protectors of the earth, because they still go back to they're in a lunar cycles. They're in complete harmony with the earth. And when we get out of harmony with the earth, then we do all kinds of destruction of the earth, and that's the patriarchal cultures, which are so warlike, and the matriarchal cultures, actually, and this is so fascinating, the mother goddess cultures, the matrilineal cultures, never had war. Because in all the excavation sites, there's never been one implement of war ever discovered in any matriarchal culture, which predated the patriarchal cultures. So all they ever found were implements of harvesting, not implements of war. The battle axe that you see was actually used to cut down trees and was used for
Right.
agriculture,
Right.
never for killing people.
Right.
So it's an entirely different orientation of life
Right.
when you get in harmony with the rhythms of earth,
There you go.
and how because creativity was what was extolled in the matrilineal cultures.
Absolutely.
And patriarchal cultures, war is extolled.
So what we really need to be doing right now is praying for harmony
Yeah.
of the country, of DC, of Austin,
Mhm.
all of our heads of state and
Yeah.
country is be praying for
What I
harmony.
would suggest that's even more powerful, and this is just me, based on what we're just talking about right here, is to pray to release our great feminine energy, to bring it in balance with our masculine energy. To me, that's more powerful, is to unleash the power of the feminine within every one of us. We live in a deeply patriarchal culture and in a very patriarchal world, and what we want is balance. If we bring the balance
Yeah.
within ourselves between our masculine and our feminine, everything will start to take care of itself.
That's
My big
brilliant,
prayer has
Jimmy.
been the light of truth to
Yeah.
shine on hearts, minds, thoughts, and beliefs, so that we will know the best course of action for all concerned.
Yeah.
And when we're dealing with all, we start with self. because that's where our all begins.
And Mother Sophia is the beginning of all wisdom. So wisdom, real wisdom, comes from the releasing of the feminine again within us,
Right.
and the extolling and the elevating of the feminine.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think.
Wisdom is what we need.
Well, yeah, and I
Yes.
think one of the scary things about Trump is that he doesn't, that's a concept that, anyway, he's so used to being the alpha male, or wants to be the alpha male in the room, and all the women are just subservient to him. But his daughter apparently is taking a little bit different, has a little different position with him, apparently has enormous influence over him. And the speech he gave at the Republican convention could have been given at the Democratic convention. Much of it was very, very, supportive of women's rights and all and so forth. So will he listen to her? Will he listen to the generals? Who will he listen to? See, this is why it's such a crapshoot. Yeah.
Well, he must have a pretty high regard for her, he wouldn't be wanting to put her in the,
Yeah. You get in the West Wing, when you get an office in the West Wing, that's as big as it gets. Nobody has really more influence over a president than the folks that see him every day and talk to him every day.
What about the son-in-law?
Well, the son-in-law is a real smart guy, I think, but,
Those both are gonna be very positive influences on him.
yeah, I
Both
think
of
so
them
too.
are fabulous.
And